Your host hasn't seen everything in sports, but sometimes he acts like it, and his guests probably have. Now, the host of Scorecard Scribblings, your sports guy, Brent Weber.
Well, as we continue in this era of sports chatter during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're just trying to keep it light and keep it going, and everybody remains concerned, dealing with things that we've not had to deal with in our lifetimes here in the United States, and in terms of a shutdown. We're just trying to have some fun. I'm trying to pull the curtain back too on some folks that I've met over the years who are outstanding journalists, sports journalists, storytellers, and so on. And one of those guys I've only met one time, but found his work prior to that to be among the best, and in person and just talking sports. He was right up to the same alley, and so I introduced to you tonight our guest, Daniel Brown. I guess if you were a writer, Dan has been with The Athletic for a long time. I would say you're probably past your quarter-century mark as a sports journalist. I'm just going to throw that out there. You're much younger than I am.
I am old.
Yeah, but I am old. You are much younger. You're an older. You're younger old than I am.
Okay. Okay.
But it's great to have you on. And, this right now, this time is, well, it's a time to babble. I'm babbling. And that's kind of what the shutdown has done to all of us. Either you're bouncing off the walls or you don't know who to call next. How is it working out for you in your household?
Yeah, the bouncing off the walls thing, that sounds about right. That's the only sport we've got left, right? Bouncing off walls.
Now, Dan, I mean, you and I met at that Sabre event, and a lot of your sports, great stories on all sports. I want to talk about a lot of things that I've seen, but we've got that baseball between us, and I kind of wanted to start out. We both have a long love and history of baseball, and I kind of want to start out today with just putting it in perspective. If we were in midseason, every player would be wearing number 42 today, I guess. Jackie Robinson Day, and the MLB Network and all of their media outlets have been devoting attention to Jackie Robinson. You're a little younger than me. I never obviously got to see Jackie play or in person. I was on the East Coast when he was older, but any Jackie Robinson crossovers for you in your life and your career?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, today is, it's a baseball holiday, Jackie Robinson Day. Everybody wearing the 42, and I guess one of the fun things about today has been, on Twitter, on social media, you see players remembering that. Season's not going, there's no games on the slate, but people are chiming in with their Jackie Robinson salutes, and that's nice. One of the closest thing I got to a crossover was when the movie 42 came out a few years ago. One of the cool things that the studio did is they got some of Jackie Robinson's old teammates to speak to the movie and speak about Jackie Robinson. And I wound up talking to Don Newcomb, the great Dodgers pitcher, for a long time. And, got one of those guys who really benefited almost immediately from Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. And, he talked about the movie and its authenticity. And, he thought the Branch Rickey portrayal by Harrison Ford was terrific, and Jackie Robinson himself. One of the things that he talked about, because we, as sports writers, as fans, always talk about the Giants-Dodgers rivalry. And Newcomb told some interesting stories about how, they were rivals on the field, but Jackie Robinson, Willie Mays, Monty Irvin, all those guys were friends. And after a Giants-Dodger game, no matter how heated, they'd all go out together. And Jackie and Willie and Monty and some of those other pioneering ball players, they realized it kind of had a bigger fight, a bigger struggle going on than a Giants-Dodgers Tuesday afternoon game. So I didn't know that. I didn't know how much camaraderie there was between those greats and those supposed rivals. And Newcomb kind of brought that to life for me. It was really, that's one of those where you don't ask a lot of questions. You just sit back and listen.
Yeah, very interesting and that makes sense considering that, those guys had, they were facing, social pressures, obviously, that you and I can't relate to, but we can historically try to continue to understand because, again, wasn't that long ago. That it makes sense that they would have that, I don't know, that inner camaraderie that they probably even came over from the Negro Leagues where, they were proud of what they did as a group, as they should have been, because they were great ball players, and maybe that really probably helped them all through the transition.
Yeah, the one difference Newcomb pointed out was that Willie and those other guys they'd go out and hit the town, and Jackie Robinson was not a guy who would hit the town. Really, as the movie portrayed, he was super, super, super dedicated to his wife, who was in that struggle with him, and he said that was not Hollywood fiction, that Jackie really was that dedicated to the woman he married.
Right. We're talking to Dan Brown from The Athletic. Of course, you know his work prior to that from many other places as well, San Jose Mercury News. Do you still have the Twitter handle Merc Brownie?
No, I'm Brownie Athletic now.
Brownie Athletic. Okay, so we've got to get that right. I am not the Twitter guy that I should be, but I live vicariously through others. And the fact of the matter is, contacts right now for journalists and sports journalists, you being in a place, working the Bay Area mostly for your career, that's got to really help you in terms of contacts, trying to get in touch with, feature stories, maybe stories that you didn't know were out there until you just started calling people. Is that some of what's going on out there? Trying to, stay relevant with what's going on, beyond Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, for example, did a story the other day on some of the Bay Area commercials that used to air. They were called Carpool Confessions. They'd air during Giants games on the CSN Bay Area, and the premise was they'd take their two anchors, and in the back seat would be a Steph Curry or a Buster Posey or Billy Beane of the A's, and the gag was that they were on their way someplace, and there'd be some, Billy Beane would be working the phones the whole time, or Andrew Bogut at all 7 feet would be sticking his head out of the sunroof, and we kind of. Besides the games, you miss goofy fun like that. So my boss decided, hey, let's do a story on the history of those ads and find out behind the scenes. And during the regular season, it's so hard to get some stars on the phone. But in short order, like with no sweat at all, Hunter Pence called, Andrew Bogut called, Zaza Pachulia called, Stephen Vogt called, Billy Beane called, of course. The whole gag was him working the phone. So, it was nice to know that in this time of sports standoff, that those guys are just as bored as we are, and will happily call up and talk about some 30-second ad they did 5-10 years ago.
In fact, I loved that piece in the Athletic, and I thought the same thing as I was reading it. I'm like, wow, you talked to all these guys who were available to kind of go back and talk about it. And that's when I also saw one, and I'm guessing you found the one, and I may pronounce her name wrong, a piece you'd written recently about Rebecca Mira. Did I pronounce that correctly? The middle distance track runner from Stanford. Was that your piece?
It was, yeah. Now she was for your listeners, she was a runner now who lives in Oregon actually, and really at the very beginning of the COVID-19, when the world started to shut down, and there was probably even more fear and uncertainty that there is now, because now we kind of know the drill. But she was working her way across a parking lot to Safeway to go stock up on some goods for her shelter in place, and she heard a kind of a shout out from a car nearby, and she turned and looked, and it was some older woman, and her husband had the window cracked down just halfway, and they called her and said, "Can you help? Can you help?" And Rebecca Mara walked over, and the elderly couple, was too scared to go into the store and buy the stuff on their own because they're at that danger age, and they were asking anybody who would give them the time to go and she gave them the grocery list and a $100 bill, and Rebecca took it inside, did all their shopping, crossed out, I think, everything on their list, and brought it back to the car and loaded it in. And, kind of that was that. She did, as she said many times, what anybody else would do. But her boyfriend encouraged her to put it on Twitter and just say, here's what I did, here was their reaction, remember to look out for your neighbors, because simple things can mean a lot to these people. And it went crazy viral on Twitter. Like, she was not a big star or anything. She wasn't somebody who had a huge number of followers, but she started watching it go to 1,000 likes, 2,000 likes, 100,000. And by the time she checked the next day, not 300 million, 3 million people had seen that post. So I did a story on her and her reaction and some of her running history, and I think people liked it because it was, hey, she did a simple thing, and it kind of resonated around the world, and that's the age we're living in now, where little things go a long way.
We're talking to Dan Brown with The Athletic, also the author of a couple of books, particularly of interest to Bay Area fans, The Big 50, San Francisco Giants, The Men and Moments That Made the San Francisco Giants. And I want to ask you a little bit about, it looks like you might be doing some updates to the 100 Things 49ers fans should know. We'll talk about that a little bit as we continue on this edition of Scorecard Scribblings with Dan Brown. I'm Brent Weber, your host. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a minute.
Say, Evelyn, can I ask you a question? You got a moment?
Mm-hmm.
Which team do you play for?
Well, I'm a peach.
Well, I was just wondering, because I couldn't figure out why you would throw home when we've got a 2-run lead. You let the tying run get on second, and we lost the lead because of you. Now you start using your head. You crying?
No.
Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
Well, that is my favorite baseball movie, and that's saying something if you consider it. But I got to get my League of Their Own out there. Dan Brown of The Athletic. Do you have a favorite baseball movie or sports movie in general? That's a big, wide open field.
You just played it. You might know it. You might not know, but I'm a leading League of Their Own enthusiast and scholar.
Oh.
A couple of years ago, I went and covered a League of Their Own reunion softball game for the Sporting News. They played it in Bentonville, Arkansas, and it was kind of like a where are they now for a League of Their Own.
Yeah.
Got caught up on the players. There was no Tom Hanks, there was no Madonna, but Gina Davis was there. Dottie Hinson was there. Marla Hooch was there. All the big Betty Spaghetti, all the big stars. So wow. Yeah, that's my favorite.
That's great, and that's the nature of why we do this. I mean, I went back and found a column, I guess, that you wrote after you started with The Athletic about how your career or your path towards being a sports writer, sports journalist, sports writer, sports began as it does for so many of us, as a kid, collecting baseball cards. And you say in here that there's one card that still sits in the home office. Is that true?
Yeah, it's still there as a reminder. It's like the origin story, yes. The beginnings hang in the office, and I look at it from time to time and remember how this all began.
Now, who was that? Who is that guy? Let him know.
Well, yeah, so when I was playing, it wasn't even Little League, it was like T-ball age, 8 years old, playing baseball in the park, I found a baseball card of a Chicago Cubs pitcher, 1978 Topps card, and went home and studied all the stats, got totally enamored. That card became buying a pack and studying all the stats on all the back of, hundreds of others, but that first one turned out to be Mike Krukow. It was a great pleasure of my life a zillion years later was telling him that story and blaming him for this non-lucrative career that he's gotten me into.
Well, and of course, Krukow, his second career is arguably surpassed his first. Great announcer for the Giants. And my story, when I was such a fanatic as a kid that my poor mom, I would make her take me to this one drugstore that was a few miles further away, like way on a whole nother boulevard, way out of kind of our zone, because there was a nice lady that worked there, and she didn't. I took advantage because she thought every pack was a nickel, and at that time, I think each pack was a dime or even more. And so I went, as long as she would sell them to me for a nickel, I'd make my mind. Then eventually she caught on, but I'd say I got at least a good season's worth of cards at half price.
Yeah, that's solid work.
I don't still have them all. How about you?
I tried my best over the years to keep the good ones, but there are a lot of non-good ones, and they're long gone. And then the funny thing is, I don't know if you've ever tried this, but I can't find anybody to take them, donate them, to give them away, to find some neighborhood kid to foist them upon. Nobody wants my 1979 Mike Ivies, so away they go.
He was a pretty good hitter. He was a born hitter. You say that. I have a friend who's actually been on this show before, sportscaster, sports journalist in the LA area named Jake Downey. And Jake, one of his passions is when his son was playing ball, that he was the baseball card guy. I don't know where he gets them. He buys them in lots and then he puts them in packets. And he would go to every baseball practice, every baseball game, every tournament that his young kid played into until he became a teenager. And he would give out cards. They're a mixture. And guess what I get about once a month? I live in Northern California now, and about once a month I get a pack of cards. And every now and then there's I got one here with Hunter Pence wearing his Houston Astros jersey. I couldn't quite, that one's sitting on top, and a Justin Verlander just came in the mail to me the other day.
The baseball card guy is still doing it. That's good to know.
Yeah, so that's what you could maybe do with some of your old ones. Just send a pack to your friends every now and then. Just see what you'll get in return.
Yeah, probably that package return to sender.
We're talking to Dan Brown of The Athletic, also author of a couple of books Bay Area wise. We mentioned The Big 50 about the San Francisco Giants, and one that you're working currently on updating, my understanding, is 100 Things 49ers Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die. And I guess I kind of broke the news, that you're working on an update of that one. I saw it on Amazon Prime.
Yes. I hadn't really said that yet, but so I'm happy to hear you are all over it. Yes, the 100 Things I did a couple years ago when the Niners were lousy, it didn't look like it was going to be needed to be updated for quite some time. But the Super Bowl run last year got the publishing company very eager to let people know about Kyle Shanahan and George Kittle and Jimmy Garoppolo and the great defense and the Super Bowl run. And some of the chapters are just on games. So the Dre Greenlaw hit late in the season, things like that are now part of Niners lore. So we needed to update the book. The other thing that was a little tricky was, at the time I wrote the book, the original version, Colin Kaepernick was this rising young star who looked like the quarterback for the next decade, and things changed for him in a lot of ways.
Yes,
so that part is going to look a little different now.
Wow, so you get to update that. But, it's also cool when you get a chance to look at some of those. There's some guys, I'm guessing, that either aren't around anymore, that for the first time, that you're able to revisit them as you kind of go back through that book. It's got to be some classic stories in there. Yeah,
it was fun. There was, some guys I had covered for many years, and one of the great things about that those Dynasty Niners is they're all still around.
Yeah.
So they're kind of involved with the team. They're involved with the franchise. They're regular at games. Roger Craig, who I never covered as a player, but he's become my favorite guy in the world. He did the foreword for the book because he is the most gracious, accessible, energetic, optimistic guy I've ever been around. And, so he's a chapter in the book. He wrote the foreword, and he also helps me fill in the gaps for guys like, I don't know, just what the 80s locker room dynamic was like, the things Joe Montana says in the huddle, the things he and Rathman used to combo up on when they're in the backfield at the same time. So, I don't know, getting inside the huddle like that, I think, is one of the keys to the great, any kind of great sports story or great sports journalism involves knowing more than you'd know if you saw it on your TV. And getting to know Roger Craig has been one of the great pleasures of my life.
That's very cool. I know I covered with CNN West Coast the 90s teams and the Seifert and Young and those, and you were there on a daily basis, but we'd fly in for a day, and it was very difficult you had cerebral guys, smart guys, Jerry and Joe and even Steve, who were, at that point, very careful with their time. So it was really hard to get, to know them, and I find when I see them later at an event that's when you can actually find out, more what was going on. I think that's the joy of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, those guys were so in game mode. Because I will ask other people, what was it like to cover Roger when he's playing? And they're like, yeah, he's fine. But now that he's got some distance from it and can look back and appreciate it, he wants to talk about it as much as anybody. And I think that's true for Jerry Rice, especially. He was, from what I understand, I only kind of caught his late career, but he was really difficult with the media for a stretch. And now he's Mr. Dancing with the Stars. Yeah, and he's totally gregarious at every event you go to. So those guys, if they're not playing, getting beat up every Sunday, they're actually kind of pleasant.
Yeah, and that was my experience with Rice. He would sneak out the back.
Yeah.
The PR guys would say, okay, you've got Rice this time. And we were flying in for a day to do 2 or 3 interviews, and you'd just see him sneak out the back. You'd get that, but once he was in front of the camera, no doubt about it, he was never going to get caught being a jerk in front of the camera. But those were the times that they were all business before and after practice, was my experience in those days.
Yeah. No, another funny thing is, like, sometimes they'll assemble those guys for a panel, like a alumni event or something, and Jerry will be on the panel. And if a few minutes go by where nobody's asked him a question, or if he hasn't chimed in, I mean, he'll stand up. He's bored. He wants to focus again. It's almost laughable, like, hey guys, because the timer has gone off on his head for him to be the star of the show again. So maybe he was just saving himself all that time for his career.
Well, you can go to actually to Dan Brown's page on Amazon, and if you find Daniel Brown in the store, you can click on and you'll see that you can pre-order the new one. So there's some pressure on you now. I guess you got to get it done by the end of the summer or start of the season or something, because people are pre-ordering that book, the second edition, I guess.
Yeah, pre-order. I haven't seen it yet. I know it's in it. I won't give you any spoilers, but yeah, pre-order.
Very cool. Dan Brown's our guest on Scorecard Scribblings. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we'll find out a little bit about what he knows and what we should know about what sports will look like when we return to action, or do we know? I'm not sure anyone has any of those answers yet, but we'll play along when we come back on Scorecard Scribblings with Daniel Brown. Stay with us.
Have to learn your cliches. We got to play them one day at a time. All right, I'm just happy to be here. Hope I can help the ball club. I just want to give it my best shot, and the good Lord willing, things will work out. Things will work out. Yep.
Things will work out. That is... Okay, Daniel Brown is our guest from The Athletic, sports writer, award-winning journalist. And you, of course, mentioned he's the author of a couple of books, The Big 50 about the Giants and 100 Things 49ers fans should know and do. But I got to ask you, who is your all-time best cliche interview?
All sports?
All sports, any sport.
All sports? God, what a great question. What a fantastic question. Off the top of my head, and I say this for a special, two, because they kind of fit the same mold, but J.T. Snow was spectacularly boring, but intentionally so, because he actually was a very kind of a charismatic guy and interesting and all that stuff, but when the cameras came out, he had no interest in being the colorful quote, the spokesman, the guy who would fill your notebook. He had no use for that, and I always thought it was a calculated thing. I never asked him about it, but it was a calculated thing to be boring when the cameras are rolling, so that we wouldn't do it so often. He had to do a lot, because those were a lot of the Barry Bonds teams. So Bonds would go hit 2 gargantuan home runs, and we need somebody to say something. And Snow made it clear that he was not that guy. And Posey is the same way. I think he might be more genuinely boring.
Right.
Get a colorful quote out of him. Why, good luck. I mean, he never shows even a hint of emotion, which is a credit to him, but not a real huge favorite to us.
I'll tell you, both of my favorites, and this will resonate if you ever talk to either of them, which I believe you did. Both hail from San Diego. Both who are no longer with us, in fact, which is very sad. The great Junior Seau. Junior could string together 7, 8 cliches, but the very best I ever dealt with was Tony Gwynn, spring training, CNN Sports, end of the day, last thing. He says, okay, what stories are we going to talk about? And you tell him we're going to do this. And then he just started talking. A 10-minute soundbite, answered all the questions, all the cliches, but all the questions. And then he said, we done? I didn't even have to ask him a follow-up because he got it all in there. Those two guys could get you the answer, whether or not it was cliche-ridden or not in a hurry.
Oh, I did. I never dealt with Seau. I went to his posthumous Hall of Fame induction ceremony in Canton, and his daughter sure could talk. She was fantastic. But my luck with Gwynn was a lot better. I think that's really interesting. I don't remember him being a cliche guy. He was really good. A lot of times we were asking about Gwynn, about bonds and swing mechanics, and he could talk swing mechanics and the way he could kind of break stuff down. I always thought he was fascinating. I wish I'd saved some of those tapes.
I guess I should rephrase that in that I don't think Junior's in all honesty was more the cliche guy. Tony was just, I loved the guy. I mean, he was as you said, there was nothing he couldn't talk about. And when I try to teach young journalists, and the times when I've had a couple times where I've mentored athletes too, if you can do like Tony Gwynn, you listen, you try to answer the question that's asked, and you be intelligent with it, offer what you can, then you're gonna go a long way. And that's what he did. I mean, but he could go on and without even breathing.
He was fantastic. He was always kind of same as you. I'm an out-of-town writer. I don't see him every day. He doesn't know me. But he was the most accessible superstar that I can remember. Maddox was a little bit like that, but not nearly as interesting. And I always appreciated guys who were like that because it reminds you that, yeah, it is a burden if you're a star athlete to deal with the media. But Gwynn just made it look so easy because he, like you said, he would talk for a couple of efficient minutes, and then that would be that. And the game was better for it.
Daniel Brown is with us, The Athletic, and as we're talking about the pandemic, sports being shut down, as of right now, unless I'm doing my math, the last major sporting event, it could be, who knows, championship was the Super Bowl, and that should be a year to go, wow, what a great year for the 49ers, but the bar's really high there. You got to kind of win it all. It seems like the air went out. Is everybody still behind that team, getting so close and losing to such a good team?
Yeah, the interesting thing to me is that the scapegoat wheel has landed on Jimmy Garoppolo, and I think a lot of the fallout after that has been: is he the right guy? The way he wilted in the fourth quarter when they needed a throw or two to connect, the question has arisen: can they do better? Is he the problem spot? And that's coming off the fact that they played a couple playoff games in which they didn't throw very much. They ran the ball a ton, and the question was raised now, does even Kyle Shanahan trust him to carry the offense? So my opinion is that Garoppolo is just fine. I think that there were a lot of problems in the fourth quarter against Kansas City. I think Kyle Shanahan really likes him. I think they didn't need to run in those other games. I think he was trying to, in the Super Bowl at least, probably keep the ball out of Mahomes' hands by running a lot. I mean, Jimmy G missed some throws. He missed Emmanuel Sanders for what would have been an all-time kind of game winner kind of thing. But I think that the team, at least, the locker room, the coaching staff, the general manager is behind behind Garoppolo. That defense is so good. They lost to Forrest Buckner. I'm really curious to see how they approach that in the draft. I know a lot of people are talking about a receiver at number 13. I think they might go defensive line at number 13 or trade around to get a defensive lineman. But that team is kind of built for a sustained run of excellence, I think.
And being that football at the NFL level is what they're doing this time of year is individual oriented anyway, for the most part. Theoretically, football stands a chance to get going on time. What is your overall feeling about the? And it's such a broad question, but when are we going to see sports on the playing field or on the court or on the ice?
I don't know. What's that famous quote now from Dr. Fauci? You don't set the timetable, the virus sets the timetable.
Yeah.
I kind of don't even really read that much about, projections, and because we don't know. And I think a lot of things could change. I know MLB was kind of kicking the tires on all Arizona or maybe an Arizona and Florida arrangement. I think that the next couple of weeks are going to say a lot. I think the summer itself will say a lot. The Athletic, where I work, we've got a story coming out about how Nick Bosa is having a possible time training because, the gyms are closed. He's trying to go to city parks, and the city parks are closed, so he goes at 6 a.m., and the park rangers still come and kick him out, so they're having to get creative with where to train and how to train, and I think that's indicative of what a lot of guys are going through right now. Like, this is the NFL's big business. They don't sit around the off-season on the couch. They are working and training and in gyms and under the supervision of trainers and all that stuff, and that's just all that stuff has stopped too. NFL, I would guess, would be like I said, I don't know anything about anything.
Right. I guess it's calendar driven anyway. I mean, in my mind, I think baseball could get there if all sports were due to start at the same time, which they don't. I think baseball could get there quicker, just because. I don't know why I think that. I think the NFL would be the most difficult because of the body, the physical conditioning that you can't replicate outside of when you're out, at practice working on those things, and the intricacy of what people don't realize, blocking schemes and defensive schemes. You can't just roll the pigskin out there and play NFL level football in a couple of weeks.
Right. I mean, that's you always hear that talk when you get a new coach. It's like, he really got the system in the third year. It took him a while to learn the playbook because it takes years. It takes a long time to really feel comfortable. So I think that's one area with the Niners. I think Super Bowl losers, I think the history has been that they kind of struggle the next year. But as a team with the same, Shanahan's the play caller, Robert Saleh is back as the defensive coordinator. A lot of what they put in place is staying. I think a lot of the nucleus of that team in terms of the roster is going to be the same. Things like that are going to be an advantage when play resumes because God help the teams that have a new coach, new coordinators, draft a rookie quarterback. They're going to have to do the ultimate cram session, and I think you're going to see it. I think you're going to see how life looks without mini camps and installation meetings, and I think teams that have some continuity are going to really, really have an advantage.
Yeah, I think the same thing. And this just popped in my head, and I have not done a lot of research on it, so I don't know if I saw it on The Athletic or elsewhere. Marcus Mariota to the Raiders, is that a real thing?
Yeah, it's a real thing. They Mike Mayock, the general manager, talked about it yesterday. I guess kind of the history is that both when Mariota came out of college, came out of Oregon as the Heisman Trophy winner, Mayock ranked him as his number one quarterback in the draft that year. Of course, he went number two behind Jameis Winston. But Gruden loved him too. Gruden did that ESPN quarterback camp show and just raved about Mariota. So I guess that all stuck in their memories because years later, when they had a chance to get him, they signed him as what they're saying is the clear-cut backup to Derek Carr. This isn't a push Derek Carr for the starting job. This isn't a training camp competition, but they like having his experience and his upside after a bad year. They like his chances of kind of finding himself again in a new change of scenery situation.
Well, and I tell you what, the NFL, there's absolutely, I don't even know why people act like it's brain surgery. You got to have two great quarterbacks, because I haven't seen a chart lately, but what percentage of teams actually get through a year with their starter playing from beginning to end and not being injured and missing games? You're going to need a second quarterback.
Right. I mean, the Niners learned that when Garoppolo got hurt, and the whole season was down the drain. And that was week 4 of the 2018 season. Mm-hmm. He just meant so much to what they were trying to do. I have no argument with that. Two backup quarterbacks is the way to fly. And I think the old line used to be, if you have two starting quarterbacks, you have none. You need a clear-cut guy. But I don't think that's true anymore.
Yeah. Daniel Brown's our guest. We'll be back with the final segment here on Scorecard Scribblings. We'll talk a little bit more about what stories they're working on, and I might be able to get him to talk a little more baseball too. This is Scorecard Scribblings.
Hey! Is this heaven? No. It's Iowa.
I'd take some baseball in Iowa right now. Daniel Brown is our guest, award-winning sports writer from The Athletic and author, and joins us from the Bay Area. Thanks, Daniel. Am I getting you weepy with these clips of these classic baseball movies?
Yeah, that's my second favorite. So, yeah, keep them coming.
We were talking during the break. I was mentioning to you about the NBA, and we're talking, I think it's cool, and I think it's really a home run for the NBA and NFL player and Major League Baseball players, particularly, a lot of them, for their presence on social media and even the tournaments and stuff that they're having, playing NBA 2K, or the major leaguers doing the same thing. I think that's really been a big win.
Yeah, I mean, the esports community realized that they've got a chance to get some eyeballs now for anybody who's desperate to watch even a virtual Steph Curry or a virtual LeBron James go at it. And the Warriors actually have an official team that they sponsor called the Warriors Gaming Squad that plays in these 5-on-5 tournaments. Now, that league is not based on real players. They're all based on avatars. But they're really trying to promote it during this shutdown era. But, yeah, I think you're referencing the bunch of NBA players got together, played a tournament-style bracket. Some of the games ended up on ESPN or ESPN2. I have to say I have not been following how that's going, or if it's gone or whatever. But esports is a huge deal. I wrote a story on it not long ago. They were all quarantined too. This was a year where they were going to really try and go out and do more live events. There are enough esport fans that they'd love to go out and watch the games on an arena. They'll project the game up on a big video board, and fans can follow along. And that's true of sports video games, but also like League of Legends and these other combat games. And 10 years from now, I've heard people really say this could be an Olympic sport. Like, that's how fast it's growing. So I have to say that if this shutdown goes on a little longer, I'll check it out. I'll find some fantasy team that I can make out of these fake fantasy league, fake NBA players. It's kind of fun, and the action is, as you know, it's really evolved into a really realistic looking game.
It's come a long way from my Intellivision days. For me, it would be APBA Stratomatic stuff. So I guess I missed the boat on being good at those.
Yeah, I think we're past our video game prime. But
hey, anything that
or something where we can go play in television, or
yeah,
Pong or something.
My brother still has his Pong game. He still has Pong. It still works.
Fantastic.
We're talking to Daniel Brown. We can talk about something more important, like I don't know. You doing anything during this time, like learning to play the banjo or the ukulele, or painting the house, like I've been doing? Anything since you've been kind of caught inside a little more?
No, the athletic people say, "What do you write about?" There's no sports. We've just gone the other extreme, and we're doing as many stories as we can to keep readers engaged. So we do a lot of top 10 this, top 25 that, favorite players, favorite moments. So, no, my plate's been so full. I kind of wish the real games would start again so I didn't have to work so hard to make stuff up.
Well, but that stuff is fun too. I know I've actually been doing that. I do the summer collegiate baseball Colt 45s, and I was back, who are the top 10 RBI guys? None of them made it to the major leagues, but that stuff is fun, and somebody's got to do it. I noticed that a month or so ago you had your Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame. Did you get any flack over that those selections?
I got so much flack. I stopped in the comments section. I learned my lesson on that. Here's a journalism lesson: is the goal of every city where the Athletic has a bureau made one of these, and the goal was 25 players who best represent, or 25 sports figures who best represent your region. In the Bay Area, that's impossible, right? You've got a dynasty in the Niners. You had a Warriors dynasty in the NBA. You had the A's and Giants both had turns running a bunch of World Series in a row, or in a short span. And the Raiders were great. So it was just you go to make your 25, and it's even from the Giants, are you going to rank Bonds as the best or Mays as the best? In the Niners, are you going to have Rice the best or are you going to have Montana the best? I mean, those questions alone were impossible. But here was the mistake I made: is I made 25 sports figures, and it was probably pretty representative. But then I made the mistake of trying to do honorable mentions, and that list could have been another 200 honorable mentions, and I was just kind of throwing some names out there that we debated in the comment section. Where's this guy? Where's that guy? And they were right, because you can't get them all. So no more of that. I'm giving you 25, and I'm stopped. But it was a nice reminder of like how spoiled we are to grow up in Northern California, where some of the greatest players ever in any sport were here often at the same time, and it's really glorious. And if you include some of the women's sports, like the Stanford women's basketball team, and some of the Olympic swimmers that the region has produced, and the top volleyball team, the Kerry Walsh and Jennings. I mean, that's all Bay Area stuff. Christy Yamaguchi's from here. So if you throw in Olympic sports and college sports and everything else, this is really kind of one of the sports capitals of the world.
Well, and you had Brandy Chastain in there from U.S. Soccer. So
yeah, exactly.
I will tip my cap to you, though. I think you did dodge many bullets by just numerically listing the Elite Five. I think that was genius. Then the other 20 you did in alphabetical order. So you that was wise. You had Montana 1, Say Hey, Willie Mays number 2, Steph Curry number 3, Al Davis number 4, and Ricky Henderson 5. And then you had the other 20. And people, you can just go to theathletic.com and read Daniel Brown's fun piece. But I wanted to mention those top 5 because you had Ricky number 5, which I totally 100% loved the guy, the story, what he stood, what his career was. And I noticed that he didn't get into one of the Bay Area Hall of Fames until this past year, which I thought was kind of weird. I mean, is he as beloved in the Bay Area as I think he is?
Yeah, so that was the Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame. And I actually am on the board of directors for the San Jose Sports Hall of Fame, so I've gotten a little window about how this works. I'm just guessing, but I'm 99% sure it was an availability issue. They want these guys to come and be inducted in person. So first of all, Ricky played forever when he retired like 3 years ago. And I think he's a little bit of a, what's the word? He's a guy who'd be tough to pin down to say, will you come to our banquet? And I suspect that probably took years to find the right gap in the schedule for him to come in attendance. In San Jose, we wanted to induct Steve Nash, who played at Santa Clara for many years, and that's our issue, is he can't make the banquet. So I don't think it was a snub. I don't think it was an oversight. I don't think the vote was coming up that other players were ahead of him. I think they just wanted him at the banquet. That's a big charity fundraiser event, getting the people to come in glad hand with these people as part of it. So Ricky was not forgotten.
Daniel Brown, our guest tonight on Scorecard Scribblings from The Athletic in the Bay Area. Thanks so much, Daniel, for joining us. You can find him on Twitter and find him at The Athletic, and appreciate you joining us tonight. This is Scorecard Scribblings. I'm Brent Weber. We'll see you next time. If you've got any ideas for guests, music, anything more, I keep the interviews pretty straight, try to do my research, but if you've got some ideas, just send me an email, brent@scorecardscribblings.com. And thanks very much to Jared King, my producer, and to my guest this week, Daniel Brown of The Athletic. Thanks for downloading. See you next time.